What's up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Scyushi, and we are back in some more Genshin Impact. And today we're going to be talking about Shenhe, who is going to end up being the new 5-star character that you can end up wishing for in version 2.4, which should be available January 4th, 2022, because I'm pretty sure she's actually part of the Phase 1 wish banners, which means that it's going to end up being her alongside the Xiao rerun. So those of you that are just here for the info, you just want to end up having the new materials, the new Ascension materials, here they are. You'll notice that one of her Ascension materials is a brand new resource. This is going to be related to the new area and the new enemy. So while there is going to end up being this kind of water variant of the Geo Bishop, let's just call it the Hydro Bishop, I guess, these are going to end up being normal enemies in the new area, just roaming about the world. But the material in question that we're talking about is from the new world boss, which is going to end up being a dual boss where you're going to be fighting two of these guys at the same time. I don't know whether or not they're going to have separate health bars or anything like that, but there will be a link in the description to download this Ascension card if you want to just get that and get out. And then otherwise, for those of you that are interested in more details about the character, we've got you covered. So first, let's talk about the basis of the character. Shenhe is going to end up being a Cryo Polearm character, yet another Polearm character, I know, right? And she actually seems to have some pretty nice abilities. Generally speaking, I'd say she's more of a support DPS, but more so leaning towards the support side of things. That said, obviously, she can end up being a pretty powerful character, especially with higher constellations, as you'll see when we get into her abilities. And speaking of which, let's get into her first skill right now. So her elemental skill is the Frosted Dew and Silvery Dents shall exorcise all demons, because she's actually going to end up being the same as Yun in terms of her lore. She is an exorcist character, or exorcism, whatever. So her elemental skill grants all nearby party members the Icy Quill effect and deals cryo damage in different ways based on whether it is clicked or held. So that means similar to Zhongli, where you tap and then it forms a pillar, but if you end up doing the hold, it will form a pillar as well as grant you a shield. I can put down two of these because I got higher constellations with Zhongli, but that's besides the point. So the click of her ability effect is going to rush forward together with a Talisman Spirit, dealing cryo damage to opponents along the path, while the hold commands the Talisman Spirit to deal area of effect cryo damage. The Icy Quill effect itself is when normal charged and plunging attacks, elemental skills, and elemental bursts deal cryo damage to opponents. The damage dealt is increased based on Shenhe's current attacks. So she's going to end up being one of those characters very similar to what we've just seen with Ito in the game, where he kind of wants you to have more Geo characters around to benefit from. So it seems like Shenhe is going to benefit by having more cryo characters in the party. More specifically, I think she's going to shine when she's alongside Ganyu or something like that, right? But the Icy Quill effect will be cleared once its duration ends or after a certain number of stacks are consumed. Holding rather than clicking grants a longer duration and more stacks generated. When one cryo damage instance strikes multiple opponents, stacks will be consumed based on the number of opponents hit. The Icy Quill effect and stacks on every party member will be counted independently. That means you can build up stacks on everybody in your party and spend all of them individually. So she can end up doing some crazy amounts of support DPS, as I mentioned. Oddly enough, it doesn't seem to have anything explaining the stacks. Don't really understand. So if we actually look at the the actual skill attributes, granted this is at talent level 8, you can see that the press damage, the hold damage, and so on and so forth, but you see the press and hold duration is increased. It's the press is 10 seconds, the hold is 15 seconds, but it also shows that the stacks is 5 when you press, 7 when you hold. I'm still not exactly sure how many stacks you can end up having unless it's just independent. So it's like you either have 5 or 7 depending on which you end up using, whether it's the press or the hold, and then of course all of those stacks are going to be spent on all the other characters. So weird character. I mean, they're really obsessed with stacks generally in Genshin lately, just because, I don't know, almost every character seems to use some sort of a stack mechanic. Anyways, let's move on to her elemental burst. So it unleashes the power of the talisman spirit, allowing it to roam free in this plane, dealing area of effect cryo damage. The talisman spirit then creates a field that decreases cryo resistance and physical resistance of opponents within it. So once again, you are going to benefit greatly by having other cryo characters in the party with Shenhe. So it also periodically deals cryo damage to all opponents within its field. So as far as I know, it just plop it down and then it just casts around. So it's kind of the same as how Ganyu ends up having continuous cryo damage dealt within an area. I'm not sure whether or not the spirit ends up just following Shenhe though. It'd be interesting to see, but obviously I don't have her. She's not out yet. So a lot of this is just kind of speculation, but I mean, you can kind of just see based on how the ability works that it seems like it's going to end up being pretty cool, and more so that it's going to end up hitting pretty hard. Thankfully, her burst seems to not be very complicated. So this is going to end up being the skill attributes themselves. So you can see that the skill damage, not the highest, but resistance decreases 13%. Damage over time is 50% damage. The duration is 12 seconds and the cooldown is 20. Her energy cost is 80, which is pretty much the highest of ultimate abilities, which means you're gonna have to have a lot of energy regen on her, potentially. But anyways, let's move on to her passive abilities. So her passive one is an active character within the field created by Divine Maiden's Deliverance, which is her ultimate ability, gains 10% cryo damage bonus. Once again, she is an insane support character for Cryo Team. So her passive 2. After Shenhe uses Spring Spirit Summoning, which is going to end up being her E ability, as we mentioned previously, which is the dash / the stacks thing, she will grant all nearby party members the following effects. So by clicking the ability, elemental skill and elemental burst damage is increased by 15% for 10 seconds. Yikes. And then the hold ability makes it so that normal, charged, and plunging attack damage is increased by 15% for 15 seconds. So kind of an interesting, like, I like the fact that each has its benefit rather than one just outright being better. Right? Like, that's kind of interesting because it means that there's a little bit more complexity to this character in how you're going to play it and how you're going to choose to use it. Because do you want to end up building your whole team around your bursts, or are you going to end up, trying to end up using your normal attacks, or more specifically, you can see normal and charged and plunging attacks. So she can end up actually boosting Shao up pretty well with his plunging attacks having a 15% damage increase. Anyways, her last passive talent is she gains 25% more rewards when dispatched on leeway expeditions that take longer than 20 hours. So, just the usual thing, right? When you end up going on expeditions, we just have another leeway character. So let's move on to her constellations. This is where you guys are going to see how cracked she can end up being as a character. So for her C1, it makes it so that her E ability, Spring Spirit Summoning, can be used one more time. So quite similar to Shao and how he could get a double dash, she can end up getting a double of the ability as well, which would mean that the stacks would more than likely stack on stacking, right? Like, that gives pretty good ramifications. Not to mention, it means that you could use her E as a press, and then you could use the hold, so you would end up getting the burst and the normal attack damage increase as well. Her C2 is Divine Maiden's Deliverance, which is her ultimate ability. Lasts for 6 seconds longer. So that's 16, 17, 18 seconds, which means that you basically would be able to use her ability on cooldown, just so long as you had the energy recharge, right? And then active characters within the skills field deal 15% more cryo crit damage. Yikes. Her C3, of course, makes it so that her E ability has a couple extra levels to it. Her C4, when characters under the effect of Icy Quill applied by Shenhe's trigger, applied by Shenhe, sorry, trigger its damage bonus effects, Shenhe will gain a Skyfrost mantra stack. So when Shenhe uses Spring Spirit Summoning, which is her E ability, she will consume all stacks of Skyfrost mantra, increasing the damage of that elemental skill ability by 5% for each stack. Max stacks 50. and the stacks last for 60 seconds. Yikes, dude, that's a lot of words, but basically it means that when you end up applying the Icy Quill to your party members, she will gain bonus stacks. So you could just stack, which, I mean, that's insane. So 5% times 50, so that's gonna be 250% more damage for that ability if you can manage to end up getting max stacks, which is absolutely insane. Her C5 ends up making it so that her ultimate ability gains an extra additional levels, and then her C6. So when characters trigger Icy Quill's effects using normal and charged attack damage, no Icy Quill stacks will be used up. Good lord. So that would just mean that you would just have extra damage on everybody and it just wouldn't go away. Crazy, dude. Absolutely cracked character constellations. I don't know how much incentive that's going to be for a lot of people, because honestly, I think a lot of people are going to be focusing on the rerun characters rather than her. But anyways, let's talk about how you're going to end up building her. So first we'll be talking about the weapon, which this is her new weapon, which has a substat of attack percentage increase because again, a lot of her skills scale off of her attacks. The refinement ability is extinguishing precept, I don't know. Gain 12% all elemental damage bonus. All elemental damage bonus. That's insane. Obtain consummation for 20 seconds. So after using an elemental skill, causing attack to increase by 3.2% per second. This attack increase can stack 6 times, and when the character equipped with this weapon is not on the field, consummation's attack increase is doubled. Okay, so I guess basically you would pop her out and then you're building up stacks with other characters, and then when you swap back to her, she just has like overloaded crazy amount of damage where you would just swap to her to do insane amounts of crazy damage. It's a weirdo weapon, very, very weird. But again, it's, you know, based off of the, the base attack. So you could end up using a handful of different spears with her. Primordial Jade Spear is going to end up probably being one of her best if you want to have her as a main DPS. I don't have that, but I'm just saying that it is a spear. Free-to-play spears that would end up being, perfectly acceptable would be the Battle Pass spear, because it's going to have your crit rate. Black Cliff, if you ever see it in the store, because it ends up giving you the crit damage. You could end up building her towards physical damage with the Dragon Spine spear, but I don't know if that would end up being the best bet to end up doing with her. You could use energy regen spears if you want to end up using her ultimate a lot more. So each of these ends up working. Staff of Homa, of course, is always a really good spear for a DPS character. The Catch could end up possibly working for her as well, especially because the passive ability you can get to full refinement. And then Crescent Pike can end up also working fairly well if you want to use her again as a physical damage character. But generally speaking, I'd say probably stick to the crit damage spears and then stick to one that ends up having attack percentage as the substat, just because of the way that she ends up scaling, which I don't think I have any of those spears, which means that you have to get out of the banner. But either way, that's going to end up covering her weapons. Now for her artifacts, there's a lot of different options that you can end up doing with it. Of course, I'm just using Rosaria as kind of an example. So you could end up using Gladiator's Final. Of course, that's going to end up being a great combination for her, just because of the fact that it's going to end up giving you that extra attack percentage. It also, if you have the four-piece set, will end up increasing damage even more with your normal attack, which again, based on how her Icy Quill based on how the Icy Quills work, where those will end up, increasing normal attack damage and stuff, the Gladiator set would end up working quite well. A Noblesse set could end up working well, obviously, because of the fact that you're going to end up using her elemental burst a lot. I don't know whether or not there's a new artifact set specifically set up for her. We'll have to wait and see, but they didn't end up necessarily talking about a new domain within the new area in the stream or anything, so stop me if I'm wrong there. And then of course there's always going to end up being the option of the cryo set. So cryo damage bonus, and then the 4-piece set is when a character attacks an opponent affected by cryo, their crit rate is increased by 20%, and if the opponent is frozen, crit rate is increased by an additional 20%. So that would probably end up being her best, I would say, unless we end up having a different set for her. And I would recommend that the stats you're going to be going for on your artifacts is going to be the sands, is going to be attack percentage, And then the goblet you want to actually have as cryo damage, more than likely. Maybe you would end up just going for attack percentage if you're trying to use her as 100% support, just because of her skills scaling off of attack percentage. But generally speaking, you're going to be using her to hit things. So I would say that you want to end up having a cryo damage goblet, which I don't really have any on hand right now, just to show you an example. And then the crown is going to either be crit rate or crit damage, usually just a standard DPS build. Otherwise, you could mix it up. Energy recharge is going to end up being very valuable on the character. And generally speaking, again, if you don't want to end up building her towards crit and you're just trying to use her as a support, maybe full attack percentage on all your artifacts could end up being okay. I don't think it's going to do great on her. I think you're going to end up building her pretty much the exact same as you would any other character, and the fact that she builds off of attack means that she's pretty easy to build, because you're just going to build her as a standard DPS. None of this increase her HP or increase her defense or anything like that. But anyways, thanks for watching, gamers. I think that pretty much covers it. Hopefully that ended up covering everything about her, but again, you know, I'm a little bit gray on some details, just because Honey Impact doesn't seem to have absolutely accurate information on her right now, but I mean, that'll probably end up changing over time. But anyways, hopefully you ended up finding this video helpful, and if you did, smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want to support the channel, and have yourselves a wonderful day.